Hi there, good morning. I wanted to open up my presentation with a photo of the first time that I ever flew a drone. No, this man is not commenting on how short I am. It kind of looks like it though. He's actually teaching us how to fly a drone. That was a classmate of mine. I was a student at the University of Missouri, and we were taking what was the school's first ever drone journalism class. So in that class we discussed the laws, the ethics, story ideas involving what you could use a drone for, and we actually used drones to do some journalism and tell some stories that were actually broadcast for an NPR local affiliate station on their website. So those of you who are familiar with the University of Missouri might know that we have a famous alumni who was 1 credit short of graduating. A lot of you guys wonder how I got into drones. I was also 1 credit short of graduating. So Brad Pitt decided to actually drop out and go to Hollywood, and I signed up for this drone class. So I got my degree. I like to think that I'm much better off than him. So here I am. So here's a video of some of the journalism that we did. So this is one example of us flying over
a lot of this
fire.
is native. I mean, this has never been plowed.
But thank you. We actually worked with the local fire department, and they do these controlled fires. This was out in Missouri, so there's lots of grassland that they need to, to burn off for environmental purposes. So we were able to fly a drone over to show how big is this fire, how close is it to the highway. And I will preface this by saying many of you have probably heard that it's illegal to fly a drone over the fire. We did work closely with the fire department to make this happen, so before any of you guys fly over a fire. So you've probably seen aerial photography or videography in the news. So this is a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter. This is something that most TV stations use. So this is KNBC, my local. I'm from Southern California. This is the Los Angeles TV station. And you've probably seen aerial videography before. If any of you have ever turned on the TV in LA, there's usually the traffic cam, which comes from a helicopter saying traffic on the 405 freeway again. So not really news, but that happens every day. And so the cost of this, the cost to buy that helicopter ranges from $700,000 to $1.2 million for the initial cost to buy the helicopter. Add on to that, the operating cost is $649 an hour. So most of you are all drone people. You probably know that a drone can do this for about $900 to $1,000 for a one-time fee. So obviously a lot cheaper than the $1 million helicopter. And we can achieve a lot of the same types of stories that you would use a $1 million helicopter for using just a $600 drone. So here are some examples of people using drones to report on news. So I start with sort of a fun and lighthearted example. My friends over at Good Morning America are using drones all the time for these really highly produced stories. So here's one example. They took a drone inside of a volcano, and so this was kind of just fun. Maybe not the most riveting journalism of all time, but it is exciting to watch this. They are actually using a DJI Inspire drone. So most of you are probably familiar with that drone. If you're not, it's like a $2,000 drone. Again, much cheaper than that $1 million helicopter. So this is a lighthearted story. They've also taken drones they went to Tanzania, and they showed the wildlife to do sort of a nature story. But we also have drones doing things like covering protests. So in 2013, there were protests in Thailand, and so this, the day that most of the protests happened, this was one of the stories that one of the photos that the Guardian ran on their front page. So nice photo, typical protest photo. One of the big facts in this news report is that 28,000 people were there at this main protest. So I'm going to give you all a little assignment to do right now. Think in your head of what does 28,000 people look like. You have that picture? No, nobody has that picture. You're probably saying, no, this is too complicated. I'm just thinking about what's for lunch. I tried to do this assignment myself, and I couldn't do it. I don't know what 28,000 people looks like. So a lot of journalists will try to put this into context. They'll say, you know, this is the number of people who could fill a football stadium, or this is the population of San Francisco. When they're giving these big numbers of people, they'll try to compare it to something that you're maybe more familiar with. So, got that 28,000 number in your head of what that looks like? So again, here is the photo that the Washington Post ran on their front page. Doesn't tell me maybe anything totally riveting. This is, again, your typical protest photo. But then this is the photo that the Nation ran. So now you know this is what 28,000 people looks like. Your assignment that I gave you has become much easier because you can see this is obviously taken from a drone showing all of these people filling this square. To me, this is such a powerful image, something much more powerful than something like this. And these are, they're not saying this is a bad photo, but something really complimentary to have a few photos in your story. So I talked about people using drones to show things, to show a volcano, to show protests, but people are also using drones to actually find the story. So I'm from California. We recently had a big drought. So a drone is a great way of really actually finding how the drought impacts the landscape. Of course, you can't really predict that a drought is going to happen. And so they kind of actually used a drone after the fact. They showed this lake before the drought and how empty it was. And then they were able to go later in February 2016 after that drought ended. Similarly with erosion, you can see this kind of change over time. Here's 2008, they point out where this house is and how erosion has impacted this landscape all the way over to 2011. I'm really interested in using drones to find stories for investigative journalism purposes. So I will preface this by saying this was not actually done by a journalist, but sort of just a regular person with a drone. So he was flying in Dallas, Texas, over this area, and there happens to be, right here, this is a meat packing plant. And it's a little difficult for you to see with this light, but over here is a river, and this, I don't know if you can see it, but this right here is not blue water, this is sort of red. And so this man said, I was looking at images after the flight that showed a blood red creek, and I was thinking, could this really be what I think it is? Surely not. And so I think about a journalist might be flying over and seeing these images, and they might go in and investigate this factory or investigate this meat packing plant. This was not actually an instance of a journalist. This was just a regular citizen. So he actually sent this image into the EPA and the Texas parks, and they were able to carry out an investigation and find that this meat packing plant was dumping their blood illegally, which is obviously bad for the environment, and so they were able to shut down this meatpacking plant or find them. So sort of a similar example that we didn't use a drone for, but I feel like we could have. I used to work for NBC in Los Angeles, and this was past drought. We have a lot of droughts in LA. And so we sent an intern up a tree because we got a tip. In LA at the time, there was a rule. You could only water your lawn, I believe it was once a week. And so everyone had brown lawns. We got a tip that the mayor, whose house was behind a big wall, had a bright green lawn. So I wonder how you get a bright green lawn if you can only water your lawn once a week. So we sent an intern up a tree, and he sat there, and he gathered video of the lawn, of course, being watered every night. Surprise, we have a bright green lawn. And so I wonder, you know, could we send a drone up there so we don't have to have an intern sitting in a tree every night? So we actually confronted the mayor, and here's a little script of our anchor in typical Hollywood style, who is very dramatic. He's confronting, it was Mayor Villaraigosa, and he said, we see your backyard sprinklers have been running, and the mayor's surprised that we have these pictures, and he says yes, and he says we have them on your cameras, and he says we'll check into it. And so a drone could also gather that image. But you're probably thinking, this is a little creepy. We are looking into someone's backyard. So we have no problem running an image of a backyard of the LA mayor. He's a public figure. He is being a little hypocritical passing this law, and then he's watering his own lawn. So we feel like it's public interest. We have no problem running this news story, but what if that picture is your backyard? What if we're seeing pictures of your kids? Do you want that? So this is one of the things that we have to grapple with as journalists. Suddenly with a drone, we can see into your backyard. You thought that you had a big wall and nobody could see you watering your lawn or could see your kids playing in the backyard. But now with the drone, suddenly we have access to all of these images, and is it ethical for us to publish them? So I do want to turn the tables. There's this issue of, can we publish images of what we used to think were private places? But also there's this issue of publishing pictures of public places that the government doesn't want us to see, even though they're public places. So I want to draw your attention to Standing Rock. These are protests, and this is an image of some of the protests happening. This image was taken by a drone. I'm sure many of you saw it. So a lot of news stories coming out of Standing Rock, and you probably saw pictures taken via drone. Just like you saw the protest photos, it's great to get an image from a drone and see what's going on in those protests. So here is one image from a drone. This is actually police firing a water cannon over here at the protests. And this is actually from a video. Later on in the video, they actually shoot the water cannon at the drone because they don't want the drone to capture what's happening in these protests. So what ended up happening is the FAA decided to make the area around Standing Rock a no-fly zone. So they basically said, you legally cannot fly a drone here during this period of time. And the government has every right to make a no-fly zone. They do it often when the president's in town and in their safety. They do it during natural disasters, so during fires. Again, it's mostly a safety reason, but they opted to use that no-fly zone during Standing Rock, which a lot of people felt was really questionable because we wanted to actually see those images. And so one of the things is that the FAA said they would make exceptions for journalists as long as they get special approval beforehand. But how can you really plan for something like a protest? How can you get special approval for that? And also, one thing that a journalist will tell you, Ben is my journalist buddy over here, also is that a journalist is really an everyday citizen. Journalists shouldn't have any special access that regular people don't have. That's sort of one of the ethics of journalism, is that we operate by public records that anyone in the public would be able to access. So this has all been very dubious for journalists, is that they might get special exceptions to fly drones, because that's really not true. So one of the things I wanted to wrap up with is just how important drone journalism is. I started off by how accessible and cheap and easy it is to fly a drone. We can buy a drone for $800 on Amazon.com. One of the things that I found is really interesting, especially in terms of WeRobotics, is that a lot of this footage is not shot by trained journalists. So you saw the footage from ABC or Good Morning America. That is a trained journalist, but often these photos of things like Standing Rock, that was just a regular person, an activist who was there, maybe environmentalist who gave their photos to the newspaper or sold their photos to the newspaper. So it's often gathered by people who use drones for other purposes. So I just wanted to leave you with this idea that when you are out in all of these different countries that you come from, you have the capability to do this. There are not drones there are not drone journalists everywhere. When I was a student at the University of Missouri, we had this idea that every journalist would have a drone, just like they have a laptop and just like they have an iPhone. And we thought, oh, everyone might have a drone. That was one of the things that we were wrong, is it's 2017 and not everybody has a drone. But you guys do, and the people who work in Nepal or Tanzania on these projects, they have drones, and there might be an earthquake happening that they can use a drone to show those images and tell stories. So I found that drone journalism is really, really important in not just showing images, but actually finding important stories that make a difference. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.